Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Pathways to Excellence, and it is my pleasure today to welcome a fan, it seems, a fan of Pathways to Excellence, Miss Sara Surayan. Congratulations on getting into Stanford University and to the conclusion of an epic first day of essentially being, like a confirmed Stanford student. How do you feel, Sarah?
Oh, thank you so much for the opening. I think it's sort of a sense of relief. Um, to preface, I applied to Stanford early in November last year, October. Basically, got a deferral. So technically, it's like the longest Stanford application period one can ask for because I applied early and only got the
Wow.
decision today.
Mhm.
So yeah, basically, pretty big sense of relief of knowing what they think of me.
I can imagine, yeah. It must have been like a whole dark night of the soul where basically like the long wait and a whole bunch of other things like that right there. But yeah, like I don't know, like if you were to sum up, I guess, your feelings as of right now, I guess, is it mainly like relief or like is there a bit of like excitement kind of like bubbling up here and there as
Yeah,
well?
definitely. There's a lot of things that I feel I need to research more because pre-application we were told, you need to know whether you're a good fit for the school.
Mhm.
Even after being accepted, I think there's a lot of things in Stanford I don't know about yet that
Mhm.
I think is like a treasure to explore, like to be able to see
Wow.
what Stanford can offer, in the future. That's something that I think I need to really research more, and I'm really
Wow.
excited to do
Okay.
that.
And you're like 100% going to commit then.
Yeah, I think it's been like it's no second guessing.
There's no second guessing, no question right there. I'm sure Melvin is going to be very happy, and so are the rest of your seniors as well. Well, okay, that's incredible. Like, do you remember actually, like, what the circumstances were like when you kind of like opened up that acceptance letter? Do you remember how it felt in that moment? Would you maybe share a little bit with us?
Oh, a bit of a backstory. Um, I'm basically in my accommodation in my boarding school now, KYUEM.
Mm.
And my apartment mates aren't here this weekend because it's just
Mm.
like after exams, everyone's going home. So I decided to like, sleep over at a friend's place for yesterday before Ivy Day and today before like the Stanford
Ah, I see, I
Decisions Day.
see.
So I was basically sleeping over, waking up at like 7 a.m., checking the portal, and I woke my friends up because
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't have anyone else to tell. They were like sleeping. And to this day, I think my friends are like kind of saying you sort of decrease our life expectancies by waking us up that abruptly. So yeah, the feeling was mostly like, oh, it's really spontaneous, just trying to, hey guys, I got it, I got it. Something like
Yo,
that.
what's up? This is my moment. It's my main character arc right
Yeah.
now. But okay, wow. So the day opened and it was like basically just today, right? Effectively.
Yeah. Basically today,
Wow.
this
Okay.
morning.
And now we've come to basically like almost the end of that day. What are your thoughts and impressions of this day so far?
Ooh, definitely
Mm.
consoling with friends that didn't get in was
Mm.
something that I really valued.
Mm.
Because I think a lot of my friends anticipated like their rejection slash acceptance of
Mm.
like today's results. And I feel in part that I have like an obligation to tell them that they did
Mm.
really amazing, that that there just wasn't enough space for everyone and things like that.
Mm.
And also in part because my decision to even apply to Stanford was because of several of my friends asking me to like encouraging me to apply early.
Wow. Mhm.
So the ones that encouraged me were also the ones that didn't get in today. So in part I feel like a lot of things that have a culmination towards this acceptance was because of a lot of people encouraging me, being like really really good support systems that I needed
Wow.
to value for today.
Wow. And that's incredible. Like that you chose that as the first thing to actually mention. I think it really does speak, and sorry if it sounds cliche, but I think it really does speak to your character as a person, and I truly respect that. So wow,
Yeah,
and
I think it's been
wow,
also
okay,
months of reflection, basically
bunch of
after the
reflection.
deferral, thinking about what was wrong with the application or things like that. So they gave me a
Okay.
deferral update form. That was when I really reflected why I deserve a spot at this place.
Mm. And as you thought about that, so then that's a good transition actually. So like, what eventually led you along that journey, and like, I guess like, what were some of the outcomes of that reflection process?
Mm, I guess one of it is that I realized that I'm a person that emulates a lot of other people in my life. So for
Mm.
example, both my brothers were debaters, so I naturally also took up debating. um Another example would be if I seeing my friends partake in like studying AI, I felt that I could also study something like that, or basically explore that path
Mm.
and be able to indulge myself in different areas. I
Mm.
think if you can say I'm a bit of like a chameleon, because I get attracted to like different colors
Mm.
and like different areas of interest. And I think part of the US application process doesn't necessarily benefit that, because people usually talk about spikes, and that people saying that you need to be like pretty unique in your own way. And I sort of struggled with pinpointing what I was good at, or like what I could
Mm.
sell myself as.
Mm.
So I came to the conclusion that you know what, like if they don't want me because I don't have a spike, or if I'm pretty average in a lot of things, then that's fine, because I should be thriving in a place that values someone like me.
Mm. I see. Cool, cool, cool. Well, okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. Maybe we could go back a little bit in time for a minute. So then, would you share maybe a little bit about your early background? I guess like, what led, I guess, to the Sara Surayan of shall we say today?
I think that that's a really good question, because in almost all of my applications, I remember wanting to portray myself as someone that is from Kedah, like born and raised in Alostar. Daily school, we basically went to daily school for
Oh,
both primary, secondary, SMK and SK
oh,
basically.
wow.
And then getting this Khazanah scholarship, and then coming to KY. So I think that transition is like a
Oh,
very big leap from a public school.
interesting.
So I usually introduce myself as someone that is pretty from a normal background, but has had a lot of like unique life experiences. For example, both my grandparents' sides, my mom's side, is like the house is basically surrounded by paddy fields, and then like my dad's side, the house is surrounded, stereotypically paddy fields, right? But then my dad's parents' place, they're surrounded by like palm oil plantations and
Mm,
rubber plantations and
I
things like that.
see.
So a lot of plantations everywhere, and also very much surrounded by an older generation, because I think back in Alosta, the trend with the population is that is getting older. There's
Mm,
kids like me that have succeeded through education, have gone to bigger cities, gone to KL to do jobs that were high paying.
mm,
So I was very much surrounded by an older generation that was like looking back at, they call it a better Malaysia, or a Malaysia that they reminisce to be better.
mm,
Um, and being inspired by both wanting to um, see through getting a degree that will basically both help realize that science could help agriculture, at the same time help quality of life through healthcare. Those were
mm.
the two things that I envisioned while I was applying to the Khazanah scholarship. And that was
Wow.
what I carried forward to my US applications as well. So
Amazing.
yeah, basically that's like the backstory that I
I
wanted to
see.
portray.
Interesting, cool. Interestingly enough, your backstory kind of, shall we say, aligns with mine in a way because I actually used to live in Alostar, so it's kind of fun right there. And in fact, if I were to actually respond by adding on one of my earliest life experiences, it would be essentially
Mhm.
reading books in the Kedah Public Library. And indeed, so like the experiences that you mentioned. So like your granddad lived close by to plantations. My dad was essentially a palm oil plantation manager at some point. So yeah, there's a
Oh,
bit of a
interesting.
alignment right there. But
Yeah.
okay, cool, interesting. Now, kind of drawing back on something that you mentioned a little bit earlier on, you said that you were a person with many unique experiences. Now, of course, like every life is unique in a certain way. There are multiple different branching pathways that could, I guess, like manifest when a person basically has these unique experiences. But I guess, like, what kinds of unique experiences did you have, and how did they eventually lead you, shall we say, towards caring about academics and eventually, like pushing onwards into KY?
Oh, okay. That's very interesting as well because my dad basically got a government scholarship as well to pursue
Ah,
his engineering degree. So naturally, I think the family was built on a very
mm,
strong foundation that education is really important.
mm,
It's really good for social mobility if you want to try to like climb the income ladder.
mm,
And I think yeah, that was like the aim with my family, as well as the fact that the motivation to strive in academics was in part to get a scholarship.
mm,
Because essentially, if my eldest brother didn't get a scholarship, I wouldn't be funded for my education at all. So because we
mm,
wouldn't be able to afford like three of my siblings' educations. So
mm,
essentially, like the main driving factor to take our academics really seriously was basically to
mm,
get a scholarship and like yeah to make sure
mm,
we get a good foundation in education.
mm. Right, and that really does dovetail so beautifully, really, into the fact that you were, if I'm not wrong, the president of the BASE initiative, the project that Zat started, your senior,
Yeah.
and hi Zat, by the way, if you're out there, uh, who is finishing at Harvard this year, and then now you've essentially taken on the, shall we say, scepter, and yeah, so now then you're going off to Stanford. So for anybody out there, so like if you want to get into Harvard or Stanford, then apply to BASE and yes, take out the torch. I'm semi kidding. I don't know if I stole like the part where you pitch like your
No worries. I think yeah, that was a good pitch. That was a good pitch.
okay.
It was a very clickbaity speech, like pitch.
Okay then, maybe could you share a little bit about, well, your time then at KY, and a bit more about that environment, right? That eventually led you to
Mm,
apply to Stanford. Because, like you mentioned earlier, that of course there are lots of people who were involved in this process who inspired you, told you about Stanford, and eventually went on to share this application journey with you. But yeah, what was that environment like for you?
ooh.
Hmm?
Someone asked me the same question because my friends naturally they would ask me how pre-university was like because we were all
Hmm?
separated from different pathways after high school
Hmm?
in Kedah. Um, so the way I would describe it is that KY puts you on a very level playing field. As much
Hmm?
as for me, as at least for my experience, as long as you believe that you were on the same playing field as SPP, Scholar Basrama Penuh schools or MRSM schools or the elite schools in Malaysia that usually send students to KYUEM. As long as these people like me believe that we were on the same playing ground, that we were equally capable and equally deserving of certain positions, for example, like in base or in other organizations in the school, that would have already given us the chance to, you know, be able to get a spot in these prestigious universities. So that level
Mm.
playing field was something that I held on really strongly.
Mm. Okay, okay, cool. Wow, a level playing field, huh? So like the sense that basically you and everybody else has a shot, and basically you shouldn't look at yourself as any lesser than anyone else, which is great. Like, if I'm understanding you correctly, would you say that that's an
Yeah.
accurate description of what you have right there? Yeah, that's
Mhm.
nice. You feel that actually like what you had from your KY experience is something that's generalizable. If you basically created a whole world, and of course, like this might touch on some kind of like potentially sensitive issues right here in Malaysia. But
Mm.
if you like, in your opinion, right? like if you were in a place where you felt that, there were an equal environment, so that it might not necessarily be at KY, but do you feel that your experience at KY would be generalizable to the world in the sense of like, if you were to create a world where everybody felt that they had equal opportunity, then everybody could thrive maximally.
Oh, I think now that I think of it, it's a bit ironic
Mm-hmm.
because when I say a equal playing field, it's sort of like the idea that you feel that you are on an equal playing field. But I think in reality, it does not mean the same for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It will be true in to a very big extent that once people come into a place like KY, they realize that there are
Mm-hmm.
opportunities back in high school that they didn't take that their friends took, and they're it's basically way ahead of the other person in terms of soft skills, maybe in terms of like the ability to study alone without tuition and things like that. That there's a lot of soft skills that certain students might have more than others.
Mm-hmm.
So having the idea itself that you have a level playing field does help to a certain extent, but I think the actual reality of things
Mm-hmm.
is what plays the role. So I
Mm-hmm.
think I was very privileged to have both, like the idea that I was on a level playing field and also still have certain soft skills that I was able to, implement here and
Mm-hmm.
ensure that, I was able to keep up with studies, do
Mm-hmm.
all these other extracurriculars.
Okay, cool. Now, I'd like to dig in a little bit further on that and specifically focus on, well, I guess like your interest, right, in STEM, specifically in like bioscience, right there. I guess like from what we know, of course, of the field of STEM, so it tends to be, shall we say, more male dominated. And and this is actually kind of similar to a question I asked Zat, so it's kind of like next generation woohoo right there. But in a slightly different form, do you feel that, I guess, as a woman in STEM, specifically in bioscience, which perhaps we'll pursue a little bit further, do you feel that as of this moment that you are, I guess, on a level playing field, or do you feel that there's like any sort of like impediment that might otherwise stop you from progressing?
I'd say the impediments aren't necessarily gender based. They would, in my case, I see them more as socioeconomic
Mm,
based. The ability to, let's say, visit a lab is dictated by whether your living area is close to a
mm,
university that does research in STEM. For example, I think with the case of Zad, which I learned from her application journey and her essays, that idea of like people pulling you down just because you're like of a different gender that doesn't fit the stereotype of that field,
mm,
especially like in STEM. It didn't exactly apply to me. The idea of a level playing field also most likely came in because I went to an all-girls school, which means
mm,
technically no one would be genderly stereotyped.
mm,
So that was, I think Zad also went to an all-girls school, but like situations were different. And I think at this
mm,
point in time, people do see that women are able to go into STEM. It's not just biosciences, it's also like engineering, computer science, things like that.
mm.
I guess I wasn't exactly in part affected much by that because a lot of people put a lot of trust in me that I was able to pursue these things. But at the
Amazing.
same time, there's a lot of socioeconomic factors that play into that too. That's like there aren't that many
Mm,
opportunities in the first place. So, like for example, getting a gold medal in like the state physics competition, even though you're a girl, they don't say no one would say that it's because you know you're a girl and stuff like that. So I
mm.
think back in Kedah, it was pretty okay in my situation, but I wouldn't say in general.
Ah, okay. Cool, 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 cool. Well, all right then. Kind of moving forward from that then, into I guess like Stanford. Okay, answer within 3 seconds. Is Stanford your dream school?
You asked me that before, yes.
Oh, all right, fine. Okay, cool. So then, kind of drilling in then. Yeah, when you applied to Stanford, I guess. So like many other people, in fact, pretty much everyone who applied to Stanford. So I guess that you, well, wrote a couple of different application essays. So you have your Common App essay, of course, then you have the famous like roommate essay right there, and a
Yeah.
whole bunch of other things of that nature. I guess like what do you feel were some of the most memorable parts, I guess, of your Stanford application? And yeah, like anything that you could share.
Mm. Um, okay. I think I put it out there that I was very afraid of the fact that I didn't have that many STEM opportunities. So I couldn't show Stanford that, I was really capable in STEM. Aside from all these other state competitions and stuff like that, I didn't have, a sort of concrete evidence that, I was really, really good in STEM. So I felt like I needed to amend that and show them that that was possible with me. Um, in a very different way. So I decided to approach my Common App essay entirely different from STEM. Like STEM wasn't even a part of my main essay.
Mhm.
So my main essay was basically, I think this was to me like the deciding factor for them. They
Wow.
My essay was about debating essentially
I see.
the idea that in a place where like intergenerational conversation very uh
Mm,
isn't very encouraged one and isn't very obvious. Intergenerational, I mean as in like mutual respect between like the adult population and like the teenage population isn't quite
mm,
there. I think especially with Asian culture,
mm,
the teenage ideas and opinions aren't necessarily taken that seriously. Um,
mm,
and there's also a lot of like dominance in how traditions should be um sort of like taken by the younger generation. So an
mhm,
example that I gave was the idea that certain families in Kedah would have to sort of take over paddy field plantations from their elders. And
mm,
that conflict of like these teens and like these children wanting to go off to pursue STEM, for example, or to pursue something outside of the field of agriculture isn't quite there. Um, and sort of like I wanted to juggle between the social science and the science factor
mhm.
um, in my essay. So the essay was basically about me having to juggle with like opposite worlds. So young and old generation, and then like science and social science. That was what I wanted to patch up in my application and show them that, I was capable of different things.
That's wonderful. Although, would you say that, I guess, some of your interests still do resonate with, I guess, like, agriculture and then potentially also using, shall we say, science, right, as a channel to sort of like improve different things along the way? Because I do know that, well, Khazanah, well, your scholarship body does have an avid interest in, for example, food security. It produces reports through KRI. It cares very significantly about things like, for example, supply chains and a whole bunch of other things of that nature. I guess, like, in a
Yeah.
sense, would you say that your interests still align in that area?
Yeah,
Oh,
definitely.
okay.
I read like the KRI article and I was like, it was
Wow.
really interesting to see something so close to you be portrayed in statistical data because I feel like I've never seen research done in areas like Kedah or Perlis, Terengganu, Kelantan, areas like that. There isn't usually a lot of academia surrounding it. So
Wow.
seeing Khazanah doing something like that was very motivational, very inspiring. And I think that was like sort of like a call to do something about it.
Wow. That's really cool. So, like, perhaps you might be, well, one hat that you might wear in the future might be food security expert. Wow, that's really cool. Really cool. Okay, cool. Mm, all right then. So then, are there some specific things that you're hoping to explore at Stanford at the moment? Like, Stanford isn't a specifically like STEM school, right? Like it does essentially have a lot of different things out there. Very strong English department, strong in humanities. It's strong in like pretty much any department that you could possibly think about. So like who knows, like maybe you'll end up studying like symbolic systems or something of that nature later on.
Yeah,
But
I've heard
okay.
about like their unique course called symbolic systems.
Ooh, okay. So like that's
It's
like
interesting.
or like psychology and Stanford prison experiment, whatever have you right there. But well, what would you say I guess are some areas of interest? Not necessarily bioscience, but just things that you'd be interested to explore at Stanford.
the very first thing that drew me to Stanford was their course called Science, Technology, and Society. So it resonated with me immediately, I think, because their website was like displaying things about like food security or like AI regulation, things that were STEM based but also social science related. Was something that like really resonated with me because I was someone that was interested in both areas.
Mm,
But specifically, I resonated a lot with like this thing,
mm,
genetically modified security. So food
mm,
security is also in part affected by genetically modified agriculture these days. So a lot of like misinformation as well included in the case of Malaysia's GMO rice field, I guess. Um,
mm,
which is something that I want to explore at Stanford because I think through courses like that, even in bioengineering, which I'm interested in exploring, a major in bioengineering is interesting to understand the details of how GMO is done, how we are able to sort of educate the public and also um, make sure that misinformation can be minimized as best as possible. Try to
wow.
communicate that with the farmers, with the people in the supply chain, everything. I think it's really interesting. So that
Wow.
relationship between bioengineering and society is really interesting. I think Malaysia doesn't really have that as much right now. So
Mm.
something that I want to pursue is, yeah,
That's
something like that.
really cool. Okay. Well, quick question. What's one really random course that you want to take that's totally unrelated to like STS? Something interesting that you found in like the Stanford course catalog. Have you had a chance to like have a look at the Stanford course catalog at all?
Right, I did not. I
Ah, I see.
haven't gotten the chance. Oh, I did scroll the Instagram today and I saw something about I think
Mm,
just with with the recent conflicts in the world, a lot of people are talking about one misinformation and also the ability to debate
mm,
healthily. I think okay, like with the advent of Twitter and Instagram comment sections where people most likely result in ad hominem attacks and they don't really quote real
mm.
facts. There's a Stanford class that's specifically about public discourse and
Wow. Mm,
the ability to maintain good public discourse surrounding topics like politics, choosing which side to support, um,
mm,
understanding an issue, and choosing which side you would go with. I
mm.
forgot what was the name of the specific Stanford course, but they did
Ah,
say that it was something new that
I
they
see.
introduced. Oh, it's
Disinformation,
called Democracy and Disagreement.
democracy and disagreement. Wow. Like how to actually disagree with people in a way that makes sense.
Mhm.
Wow.
Which I guess is in part very related to my Common App essay. So it was sort of like my journey with overcoming debate, being able to voice out something that I felt wasn't correct among the older generation,
Mhm.
um, but also realizing that they will stick with their ways, and it's like sort of how the younger generation should take what they want from that and not just try to change people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Cause like there's a huge distinction between like, winning an argument and also like driving change, right? I think even Kyrie Jamaluddin actually mentioned this in a Instagram story at some point. He was saying that debates are great, but they may be sometimes overrated, at least in relation to, shall we say, and not knocking debate, of course, because like I think that that's an incredible skill. But he mentioned essentially that being able to actually craft policy was well, maybe what might be more consequential at the end of the day for like say a leader. If if big if I were to ask you right now to go ahead and look at this right here, pick a random it's like store courses, right?
Random department.
Random department
That's
that you
not
want to
STEM
take a random
related
that's not STEM
or
related. Yeah, random department, not STEM related. Or it can be STEM related if you want, absolutely. But like, yeah, preferably not STEM related. What would you choose? There are so many different things here.
I'm not sure if they have that, but I'm also particularly interested in Malaysian diasporas.
Ah,
Like
interesting.
people that have been living in San Francisco,
Oh
which was
yeah, yeah,
something
for
I
sure.
quoted as well. Being
Ah.
being able to understand both like the socioeconomic causes of why people leave Malaysia and like the
Mm,
whole idea of brain drainage can also
mm,
be solved by brain linkage. I think that was like a new term that Stanford coined in one of their studies. Not really
mm.
recent, I think quite a long time ago.
Right, right.
Um,
Mm.
was the
Yeah,
idea
yeah.
that you could have like a Malaysian community all around the world that would
Mm.
still support the central cause of building a better Malaysia, something like that, even though these people are like
Ah.
outside the country. I think that was really interesting. And I think there might be a course that's related to how diasporas are
Mm.
created and how they
Right,
can
right.
still affect their own country.
Yeah, your KYUEM and Khazanah senior Jiaxing actually mentioned that in his interview. So like, yeah, like he
Oh,
actually mentioned that quite a while ago. And yeah, like so as far as I know, so like Stanford, I think is one of the major universities that I think maintains a specific site about the Malaysian brain drain. Have you seen that?
yes,
Yeah, like
yeah,
the putting the
that was what I
Malaysian brain
quoted.
drain in context thing.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was very, very specific about the causes as well.
I see. Yeah, it was indeed for sure. Well, in relation to the idea of brain drain, I guess how do you feel um about I guess like Malaysia in terms of like the long term? Of course, like like we I had a scholarship as well. I just incidentally happened to stay. Um, Although like of course there are some people out there, so like they upon essentially coming back from overseas and then essentially completing their scholarship bonds, so then of course like you're done, and they may end up moving elsewhere. It's quite a normal thing. It's
Yeah.
unfortunate, but you can't really like force people to do something that is not in line with their will. And some people, even worse, they may, even after getting the scholarship, like fly off and then kind of like disappear. Maybe because, there was no process to call them back or anything else of that nature. When you think about like brain drain at this point in time, right? Mm, Kind of intuitively, without necessarily like exploring through every single factor right now, I guess like, what do you think is the primary thing that causes brain drain in Malaysia at this point in time, like for a range of possible things, like could be cost of living, inflation, low job prospects, or it could be like anything else. What do you think?
I think one of our seniors that was in Princeton, Saiful Azhar, he mentioned that to the Prime Minister during the, I think when he was like, the Prime Minister went to San Francisco and
Mm,
like was in Berkeley talking to like the Malaysian diaspora there. And I resonated with it a lot because a lot of my friends here in KY as well, our main concern with doing a STEM degree specifically is that we are going to learn all these future technology that may not necessarily even be able to apply in Malaysia yet in like
mm,
maybe the next 10 years. Only then will we be able to get access to certain technologies is
mm,
when we come back, we don't get to apply the knowledge that we've learned. I
mm,
know it's like a common mantra that you do a degree and not expect it to fully apply to the real world, but the lack of that assurance that if you're doing like a degree like bioengineering, when
mm,
you come back, there isn't a set field that you're able to pursue, especially within the government or even in the private sector, that is
mm,
like a very scarce like opportunity to do that. So the lack of like job prospects, I think, would be like the thing that I would hold on to
mm.
with like the main reason why scholars may not necessarily want to come back to Malaysia.
I guess like as you kind of go into Stanford, will you be able to share, I guess, like what you think are kind of like your short-term goals at this point in time? Of course, like, like there's the question of like
Mm.
how short-term, right? Because if it's like within, oh, let's say within the next 3 days, I gotta figure out my visa issues. Or actually it could be like, oh, let's figure out where we're gonna be celebrating with our friends this week right here, or something of that nature. But like when I say short-term, I guess like, like when you eventually, shall we say, go to the school and yeah, a whole bunch of things. But even before that, right now, so that you have a whole bunch of like free time, right? Like leading up
Mhm.
to Stanford at the moment. Do you? But you do have like the final A2 exams, right? Like in I think
Yeah,
May, June, that sort of thing.
1.5 months from now.
1.5 months. Okay, cool. But yeah, so like until then, I guess like do you have an idea of like how you want to kind of like spend your time? Yeah, maybe let's start
Oh.
with that.
I was thinking mostly about like the goals that I would have there that I currently have now. It may change, but
Mm,
if I could share it,
sure.
there's this specific extracurricular that I'm really interested in joining, and I put
Wow.
it in my application as well because I thought that it was really interesting. It's called the Stanford iGEM team. iGEM stands for like the International Genetically Engineered Machine. So it's basically, I think, I'm not sure. We probably need to fact check this, but it's the only undergraduate and high school synthetic biology research symposium. So because
Mm,
most research symposiums these days, I think are, postgraduate dominated. There aren't necessarily a lot in like the undergraduate level, and even the high school level. You would know
mm,
ISEF and stuff like that. But I think iGEM is something that people don't really know about.
mm,
And part of that, the team at Stanford does so many different areas of things. So they have like the main research area where you do a proposal, you conduct the experiments, and then you present your results like a proper research team. Where the undergrads themselves are the ones doing all the processes, like all the
mm,
I think like the wet lab and all that, and creating the website to present your data, um, doing the statistical analysis and stuff like that. Everything
mm,
is done by the undergrads, but also with the supervision of like a professor there. But another separate element that I'm really interested in is the education part. So
mm,
I was really, really fortunate to apply for it back in October last year. So I was basically a participant in their education segment, where
mm,
they were teaching like high schoolers for a set of 12 classes about basic synthetic biology. Um, and they were
mm,
able to like boil it down so simplistically that a high schooler could understand it with
mm,
literally no knowledge in GMO, no knowledge in plasmid design and stuff like that. So
mm,
being able to learn that, and so my goal is sort of like to join that team and be able
mm,
to do something better than what has been done before. Because I basically in my college search process, the way I would see whether or not the bioengineering department was really good was through iGEM. Because in my mind, iGEM was like the extracurricular of for bioengineering. Um,
mm.
and I would see whether that school did well in the symposium, like whether that college did well in the symposium,
Everything
or
was
whether I
compared to
was taken
Stanford.
aback. Yeah, whether I was like really taken aback by what they did. And
Uh,
Stanford's one was really appealing to me because they basically coded an entire
mm,
virtual game to
mm,
teach students the wet lab technique. So
mm,
let's say if this like kid from some rural area in a
mm,
developing country didn't know wet lab, like
mm,
didn't even have a beaker close to them. The virtual game itself was the area where you could learn and mix around samples and get a
mm.
result. So it was more of
Wow,
like, it's a bit like a sandbox game, but there were a lot of instructions
I see.
about like the science behind it. So short term slash I would say it's also a long term goal is to get to the iGEM team and be
Wow.
able to do something for the education department.
Mm. Kind of moving then a little bit more long term from there. I guess, well, you've had quite a number of different experiences, ranging, of course, from bioscience, which, of course, you feel that you want to extend a little bit more. And, of course, well, there's the debate aspect, which has been essentially a big part of what you've been doing as well. And I guess, like, how do you feel that things are eventually kind of like building up along the way? Towards what you would consider like the long term. Of course, there might be some parts like, working for Khazanah or various other things of that nature, but do you have some sort of long term aspiration, dream, goal, idea maybe that you want to put into place or way that you want to specifically change Malaysia in?
Mm. Oh, I thought about this for so long because I remember in the comment app they said future career interests, and I was like, oh no, I really don't know which one to choose. You know, you could just go for engineer, and it would be like
Mm-hmm.
problem settled. It can change in the future, and like an engineer can be like like someone that has an engineering degree. It doesn't mean that they're an engineer in the workforce.
Right,
But
right.
the thing that I went with was policymaker because I
Mm-hmm.
felt that it was in the intersection of social science and science, and also still be able to affect, like, you know, policy making in terms of like agriculture, healthcare, public health, stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. But also being able to reflect on that a bit more, I have doubts about joining politics. So maybe not.
Understandable.
We'll see in the future. But yeah, once that, another idea that I had was
Mm-hmm.
the lack of think tanks in Malaysia.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have like the general Khazanah Research Institute, or ideas like for democracy and
Mm-hmm.
economy. I think that's what
Mm-hmm.
I forgot what the acronym was for ideas. So there aren't that many think tanks in Malaysia that are doing research, policy research about
Mm-hmm.
critical areas in the country, aside from KRI
Mm-hmm.
and ideas, the more popular ones.
I see. Okay,
So
cool.
in the sense that if I become financially stable in the future, I think having a science-based think tank will be really important, because I feel that science is probably like the way of the future. If anything, social sciences may be affected by tech a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So having a specific think tank that's, specialized in these types of issues that
Mm-hmm.
Malaysia might be facing,
Mm-hmm.
will probably prepare us a bit more, than to receive shock waves of new technology coming into the country, and government or other organizations like big private firms not being able to juggle or be able to regulate their
Mm.
ability to use the tech. I think will be
I see.
interesting.
That's incredible. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, I mean, definitely having more think tanks is going to be important in a whole bunch of different ways. Of course, there's the question of like how that funding would come about. I don't know if
Mm,
politics would eventually become a part of that. But, if I can see you as a young Berhormat in the future, potentially
mm.
competing with your senior Celeste, who apparently wants to become Prime Minister of Malaysia. Do you hear about that?
No, I
Have
did
you met
not.
have you met Celeste before? Celeste
No.
Chong. Celeste Chong from Kuching. So like let me show you an interesting article. Gosh, Celeste, you're gonna appear right here. Let's see. All right. There's an article actually. So yeah, right over here.
Oh, wow, that's so cool.
Now you know, yeah. So like, maybe you can be all like, "Hey Celeste, what's up? Like, I need funding for my think tank right here." If you don't want to do the whole young Bahomat thing, then like she can do the young Bahomat thing. Had you heard about her before?
No, actually, no.
Are you going to US apps this year?
I'm not sure. I still have not decided about it. I did think about it though. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. US apps, if you're looking for a new core committee member. Oh, kidding, kidding. Let me not put you on the spot. Okay. Okay, well, thank you so much for, I guess, well, sharing about those aspirations. I hope that in some way, shape, or form, yeah, like you'll be able to receive some variant of them or whatever it is that your heart desires. Plenty of time to think about it along the way. Moving towards the end of this conversation, if there were a piece of advice that you would give to your younger self or like any other younger selves right there who are kind of like watching this interview at this point in time, like what might it be? And in a very real sense, like it's kind of interesting to think about like a future version of you, like potentially giving advice to a younger version of you right there.
Mm.
So like you get to be that future version of yourself right now, giving that advice to the younger you.
I'm gonna go with a more practical answer, because I feel like um most would give an answer that would be more reflective of the journey. But what I've realized, at least for today, was like some of the mistakes I made in my application. And I think if anyone is watching right now that's like really interested and is really geared to try to get into the States, would
Mm,
be to make sure you know that you're a fit for that university when you apply.
Mm,
Coming from someone that applied to all the Ivy Leagues in my university list, I realized that, searching up the course catalog and um, the clubs and societies that you're interested in may not even be enough to realize how good of a fit you are for that school. It's also maybe checking the Reddit accounts of each school and seeing whether you're the type to, respond to certain things the way they are, or also checking the surrounding opportunities that there is in the university. So very specific to Stanford would be like, for
mm.
me, like the Malaysian diaspora was something that I was interested in. Um, and also even within those clubs and activities, to identify the skills within those clubs that will be beneficial. So most of the common questions that they usually ask is like, what contribution can you make to that university? And for someone that's only 18 years old, that's really hard to pinpoint, because we may not necessarily be sharpened in certain skills, but to recognize that there are these certain activities that are within those schools that that you specifically can contribute to, I think that's really like that would be a really good strategy, which you can employ to any other school. Yeah.
Incredible. Cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. As we head towards the end, then, do you feel that there are currently any like projects, things that you potentially want to share with the audience, that you'd like potentially people to get involved in or otherwise?
All right. Thank you so much for that slot.
Mm,
I'll take the opportunity to sort of um, market KYUEM Summit. I
mm,
am I know the previous installation was in 2021. It was an online version, but basically KYUEM Summit is supposed to be this platform where young people like us are able to suggest policy ideas in the field of economics, in politics, social policy. This year specifically on education for B40 students. For science and technology, this year specifically also
mm.
on artificial general intelligence. And the last one and like the newest version also is environmental policy, because previously we didn't have one. So we decided to include that this year. And if you're someone that resonates with like these five fields, that platform is basically where you're gonna write resolution papers, basically a bit of like a blueprint of what you think Malaysia will be facing, and what we, young people think about how we can tackle these issues. And we will present that to hopefully industry professionals that we will invite to KYUM. So if you can make your way to KYUM in any form, like, through bus or whether you live in Selangor or in Perak, in the vicinity, anyone is encouraged. SPM students that have just graduated, you have a lot of time after SPM before you get into pre-university. It's gonna happen in June this year, so
Mm.
late June, somewhere in there, and you can go visit the Instagram page. It's called KYUM S Summit, SUMMIT. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Wow. One final question. Final question. I guess like okay. So like actually, so I know that you've been watching like this channel for a while, right? But I guess like what drew you here in the first place?
I can't remember exactly how I found the channel. I know it was because Malaysian success stories to these universities aren't exactly public a lot of the time. If you're not in KY, I think you wouldn't know these faces
Mhm.
at all, because for us, we would basically get some access to, some of the seniors' essays and stuff like that. But for someone that's maybe outside of KY, that this channel is probably going to be like a haven for information for strategies that might apply to a Malaysian trying to get into these unis, because I think there are um, specific examples or specific strategies that can work more with Malaysians, given
Mm.
our like our high school education system and how it can translate to like the
Ah, I
current
see, I see.
way you are going
Cool.
to apply to the US.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on the channel and thank you for the interview as well. And yeah, so I'm sure that well, right now, you're literally just in day one. There's going to be much, much more ahead. And yeah, so I hope for all the love and light that you are going to be receiving, and also all the celebration that you're looking for along the way as well. Thank you so much, Sarah. And are there any final words that you'd like to share?
Oh, I also like to give a shout out to the Siamese Malaysian community.
Mm,
Um, I think it's at the start of this like conversation, there's a lot of like questions on what my ethnicity is. Maybe there might be a question of that. I get a lot of like whether or not you're a Sabahan or you're Sarawakian. And I think most people in Malaysia may not know that there are native Siamese people that are living in Kedah, in
mm,
Perlis, so in Kelantan as well, and also sometimes in Selangor and KL, that are Malaysian citizens, born and raised here, and have built certain communities in like the northern area of um,
mm,
Peninsular Malaysia. So a shout
mm,
out to them because I think they may not necessarily be represented, and I hope
mm.
me being able to represent kind of like represent Malaysia to go into Stanford will be a good inspiration for the people that are back there watching.
Yes, I'm confident that many people will be inspired. Thank you so much for your time and for this wonderful. And yeah, so have a wonderful evening ahead. And yeah, so power through and break through the walls of the universe.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.